Hi, this is Nancy Rolfsma with On Point TV and Quilting with Nancy. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We are continuing the series Sunset Over Dublin, which is an 8-inch sampler block quilt. There is a book available if you'd like to purchase that to follow along. And we're a little more than halfway through at this point. We've made quite a few of the different blocks using different techniques. We've got a couple more to go before we do the settings, which will be on point, of course. So for this block, we're going to be making a chevron block. Now the chevron block is kind of like a stepsister to the Flying Goose block, but there's some tips that I want to talk to you about. For this block, we will be using the connecting corners technique, which honestly means that there will be some wasted fabric, but the only other way to make a chevron block is cutting things on diamonds and dealing with a whole lot of bias edges. So I don't think I've ever even attempted to make a chevron block by pre-cutting everything. I've always done it this way. So we've got the two colors we're going to use is the pink and the red, and I've cut these rectangles 2.5 by 4.5, and 4 of each of those, and 16 2.5-inch background squares. Now on the background squares, you want to either draw a diagonal, which will be your sewing line. Not normally we use that as our cutting line when we're doing like half square triangles, but for this, that is going to be our sewing line. Or you can use another technique that I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to take one of each of these to my sewing machine. So here at my sewing machine, I've got my needle set right in the middle. I've not moved it over like I normally would. It's right in the middle. Now, I can do the technique where I'm going to sew on this line, and I will do that for this first one, but this is called diagonal seam tape, and I just find it to be really helpful. I use it for my 1/4-inch guide sometimes, but mostly I'm using it when I'm wanting to do blocks like this, because I love that center line, which is lined up directly with my needle. So when I'm sewing a connecting corners block, I don't want to start sewing on the tip. If you start sewing on the tip, honestly, it's a little hard to line it up, but there's also the chance that your sewing machine can take that fabric down inside. So instead, I like to start sewing in the middle of the rectangle, and I'm going to start right there on the corner of the black fabric, and looking down here, I'm going to have this diagonal be lined up right there on the red line. So as I'm sewing, I am not looking at the needle. I am looking at the corner, that 45-degree corner, making sure that it goes on the red line. So let's add another one, and this time I will not have the lines. Lining it up, starting in the center of the rectangle, and then looking down here to keep that point right there on the center line, and then ending on my leader piece. Cut this off and cut my leader off the top and separate them, and going to my ironing board. So for these blocks, we've sewn right down the middle, and we're going to press that first, flat, always setting my seam, and then before I trim off the excess, I like to press it up first. I just think that when I leave the other fabric in place, it is just more secure. Everything isn't so flopsy around. So I press that first, give it a little steam burst, and then I trim away the excess. So right here, I'm going to open that back up and just trim that to about 1/4 inch. This is what I mean by the wasted fabric. You're going to have one of these triangle sets with each one. Now what you can do, and I showed this on the previous video when we were doing Flying Geese with connecting corners, you can do another seam right here, maybe 3/8 or 1/2 inch from the original seam. Then when you're cutting this here, these would already be sewn together and you'd have a fun little half square triangle, but that's totally up to you. Right. So now for the chevron, it's going to be very similar to how we made the connecting corners Flying Geese blocks, taking 2 more squares. You're going to place it right on top. But This time you will not be sewing from here to here, which would create a flying goose. Instead, you'll be sewing from the center of the rectangle to the point, which will give you more of that look, the chevron. So let's go to our sewing machine. Again, I don't want to start sewing at the point. I want to start sewing in the middle of the rectangle, then using my diagonal tape to help as my guide so that the point is running right on the center blue line. One more. There we go. Ending with my ender. Trim these apart. Back to my ironing board. Press it first, flat first, then flip those up. And then I'll trim off the excess of that, and that is a chevron block or chevron unit. Now I'm going to get the other ones made for this and show you how to put this all together into the block. So I made my chevron blocks, and now I'm going to put the stamp of warning on this block. When you make it, because I started out, I was just going to make one of each like this, and then I was going to make the other 3 off camera, which I did. But do you see what's wrong with them? It's the angles that they're going. So the ones that I made all 3 together, they're all going in the correct angle for this block. But the 2 that I made before, they were different. So here's what I want you to do when you make this block, is make them all at the same time, going in the same direction. It just makes it a lot easier. Now keep in mind that you can do them in different directions like this, and then it will make a chevron going up and down, which makes a super cool border, which makes me think maybe on this quilt, that's what I should do on the border. Okay, I'll do that. When we get done, you'll see that I'll use the chevrons in opposite directions for a chevron border, which is honestly a really, really cool technique. But for this block that we're making, we want them all in the same direction. So I made a couple of extra ones, but that's okay. It was all right. It's quilting. I'm good with this. So get rid of these ones that are wrong. I think those ones. Oh, and then you also, here's the one that's right. Those are wrong. Over there. Don't need them right now. You can use your Flying Goose. So if you purchase the Block Lock Flying Goose ruler for trimming down the 2.5 by 4.5 inch Flying Geese that I recommended, you can use that for trimming down the chevrons too. So if you'll just take this one angle and place it on the angle, then you can see if you're squared up. And I see that I have a little bit here that I can trim off. So I'm going to put the angle on. Everything else is pretty true, but I can then trim off that little guy. So use your block lock ruler a little bit more, making your chevrons. So for this block, I'm going to take and put these 2 squares together. Now there is no points to match up, but you really need this. It's best, or I guess if it's perfect, we know there's no perfect, so why do I even talk about it? But I'm saying if we want to get it close, we want to get these 2 lined up so they'll crisscross in the middle. You want to just be careful that you've got them lined up here, and then you can sometimes see right through to see where the intersection is. Sometimes you want to mark where that scant 1/4 inch is, but I'm looking at it here and I'm thinking, all right, if I sew with my scant 1/4 inch kind of looking through the block, I can see where it's going to match up. All right, so maybe you're going to put it up into the light so that just be sure that you're trying to get that intersection so that the black pieces line up. They're not butting in the different directions. It's almost like doing a Lone Star quilt. So let's line these up and go to my sewing machine. I'm going to bring all 4 of them at the same time, and I'm going to use the 1/4 inch from the diagonal seam tape that I showed you earlier. Lining it up on the inside of that should make this get, I don't know, as close as I can get, knowing that I can't get perfect. If you're one of those that thinks that you're going to be able to do your quilting perfect, I probably have a book I need for you to read, because it's not going to happen. All of this is just fun, making a quilt, and it's all art, and there's no such thing as perfect art. one of the things I tell my students quite often is I don't go backwards. Students, especially beginners, are oftentimes wanting to sew the block, see that it is not right because they're beginners, and then take it out and do it again. And I don't recommend that. I recommend that you keep going forward. Now, I must admit, for this one where I did the chevrons going in the other direction, I did have to make some new blocks. But typically, when I sew the seam, it's there for good. So this is my last one. This is another one of those blocks that is done in a quadrant. So I'm going to have 4 units that are all the same. And the pressing on these, there's like no easy way to press these. There's not going to be a press to the least resistance. Let's just see what we can get. All right, I'm going to press them to my left side, so to the red. So I'm going to start with the red on top, give it a little heat, and then press that up. And ooh, look at that. My intersection is pretty good. It'd be great to get that diagonal running true. Just so happens that it worked. If it didn't, I would have just let it go. I would not have changed it. Let me move this out of the way a little bit so my iron's not so close. Then I can flip that up. Now there's another one that's pretty good. All right, I'm batting, that would be 500, right, if I'm halfway there. Let's see if I can get a batting 1,000. No, that one's not quite as perfectly matched up. The blacks are a smidgen overlapped. Yeah, just put it in the pile. Nobody but I am ever going to notice that. There, that one's good. So I did pretty good. Now that they're pressed, you're going to construct the block in the quadrants. And by doing that, nope, that's not right. Wait a minute, do I have it right? All right, I'm going to need my instructions. All right, so if I have the red one, and then, so that's in the middle. Oh, there it is. That's the middle. Then that's the middle. There, that. For a minute there, I was really getting scared. There. That's what the block is to look like. So it creates another pinwheel. So let's take this and put that over the top. Now at this point, we will be able to get this seam because this seam is pressed toward the black and this seam is pressed toward the black. So they're in opposite directions. So when I put them together, I can get them to butt right together, which means I'm going to put a pin in there. And then this intersection, there is a crisscross, so I'll be able to match that up nicely. And the 2 rows are pieced exactly the same. Let's go to our machine. Starting right here. And I'm looking at this intersection. I want to be sewing pretty much right into the middle of that intersection. One more. Right there to that intersection. Off onto my leader. Let's see, which way do I want to press these? So I want to press these toward, do I want to go that way? I think the point of least resistance is to go to this one. So I'm going to start with the one that I want it to go toward on top. Then it flips over. Yeah, that is definitely the point of least resistance. And the 2 rows are exactly the same. That'll go together and I'll be able to match up that intersection right there with the seams going in opposite directions. Pin that. Then go and press seam this, and then we'll be done with this block. So the chevron blocks are not hard. The only thing you need to be conscious of is that you make them go in the right direction. So if you're following the instructions that I've written, if you look at the diagonal that I have given you, you'll be fine. as opposed to me that I thought I knew what I was doing, so I didn't look at the instructions. That's why I ended up making them go in the wrong direction. But that did make us decide to put a chevron border on the outside of it. I'm going to like that. So looking at this intersection here, I'm going to seam separate. So this time I'm going to take these stitches out just to that last seam. So the stitches that were going in this direction, the ones that cross here, so I'm going to take 2 of those out. There. And flip it over and do the same thing here. Can I get them? Oh, there he is. Just missing it. There. And then this one. So I should be able to get this to seam separate, going in opposite directions. There we go. Press that. I'd probably give it another little bit of a spray sizing. Let's see how, let me fix that little seam. I don't like how he's flipping in the wrong direction. I can't be perfect with my piecing, but I sure will try with my pressing. Ooh, all right, that looks really nice. So I like this block. It's the chevrons, but I like how you get this pinwheel in the center and then these long points going here. So let's see what size it trims up to. So it's supposed to be 8.5 inches at this point. So what do we got? So she's pretty close, maybe a smidgen bit, a 1/16 of an inch short there and there. So I'm going to call that good to go. Block is ready to go into the quilt. So when we get back together next time, we are going to do the most difficult block in this quilt. We're going to do a Lemoyne star, and Lemoyne stars have set-in seams. You can't trim anything, you can't cut things big to begin with, so it really is the most difficult block. Now what's fun about this quilt is if you want to make the queen size and make 41 blocks, you don't have to make the Lemoyne stars. You can just duplicate another block, but I really hope that you join us to learn about making the Lemoyne star block. It is one of my very favorite. If you haven't subscribed to the channel now, please do that and hit the notifications button. If you have any questions, you can contact me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.